Power comes from self-respect, not begging, and if you don't understand this truth, you will always find yourself stuck in cycles of disappointment, pain, and chasing people who were never worthy of you to begin with. Respect is not something you can demand through tears, through pleas, or through lowering yourself to prove your worth. Respect is earned from the inside out, built brick by brick through the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, and most importantly, the way you refuse to settle for less than you deserve. Begging tells the world that you have already surrendered your crown, that you are willing to throw away your dignity just to keep someone who doesn't even recognize your value. But self-respect sends a different message. It says, I don't need you to validate me. I don't need your attention to breathe. I choose myself before I ever choose you. That is where real power begins. The reason most people lose in love, in relationships, in business, in life, is because they hand their power away for free. They mistake desperation for effort, and they think if they just try harder, beg louder, cry longer, maybe someone will stay. But love that must be begged for is not love, it's control. Attention that you have to chase is not real admiration, it's pity. And approval that requires you to shrink yourself into someone you are not is not respect, it's manipulation. When you operate from self-respect, you don't even need to demand these things. People feel it. They sense it in the way you carry yourself, the way you can walk away from nonsense without looking back, the way you refuse to settle for being treated like an option. Think about it. When you beg someone to choose you, what you're really saying is that you don't believe anyone else will. You're announcing to them that you're replaceable, and worse, you're telling yourself that you don't deserve better. But when you stand in self-respect, when you embody confidence without arrogance, when you walk with the quiet strength of knowing who you are, people respond differently. They lean in, they take you seriously. They start to value your presence because they see that you don't give it cheaply. Power is not about forcing people to obey you. It's about making your value so undeniable that they would rather lose anything than lose access to you. Self-respect creates boundaries, and boundaries create clarity. When you respect yourself, you know what you will allow and what you won't. You don't waste time entertaining liars, manipulators, or half-hearted people. You don't compromise your peace just to keep company. You understand that not everyone deserves your energy, and the moment someone disrespects you, you either correct them or cut them off. That kind of discipline builds unshakable power. Begging, on the other hand, is chaos. It blurs boundaries. It makes you tolerate the intolerable. It traps you in toxic situations because you're too busy trying to hold on to people who should have never been in your life to begin with. There is a reason why the most magnetic people in the world never beg for attention. They attract it. They're not chasing, they're not explaining, they're not justifying. They know their worth and they move accordingly. That's why people gravitate toward them. Desperation repels, but self-respect pulls people closer. A person who respects themselves has an aura, an energy, that silently commands others to rise to their level or leave. That is power, and let's be real. When you beg, you don't only lose power in their eyes, you lose it in your own. You can't look in the mirror the same way, because deep down you know you settled. You know you gave away pieces of yourself just to keep someone who didn't even deserve the privilege of being near you. That's why begging always feels so heavy. It's your soul screaming at you that you betrayed yourself. But when you respect yourself, you stand taller, you feel lighter. Every decision you make from self-respect reinforces the truth that you are enough, that you are whole, that you are not here to chase scraps when you deserve the feast. Power from self-respect also teaches patience. You don't rush into situations just because you're afraid of being alone. You don't cling to people just because you fear losing them. You understand that your life doesn't end if someone leaves, it expands. You know that if someone walks away, it simply means they weren't strong enough to handle the weight of who you are. And instead of collapsing, you grow, you learn, you rise higher. Begging keeps you stuck in the same lesson, repeating the same mistakes, because you're too afraid to face the silence. Self-respect gives you the courage to endure the silence and build a new chapter. It also shifts the way others view you. A person who begs for love becomes forgettable, but a person who commands respect becomes unforgettable. They may not always be liked, but they will always be valued. And in relationships, this difference changes everything. When you beg a man to stay, he loses attraction. He feels suffocated, not because you love him too much, but because you love yourself too little. But when you respect yourself, when you are willing to walk away rather than accept disrespect, he feels something else entirely. Fear of loss. That fear makes him chase. That fear makes him step up. Because men, and people in general, respect what is rare, not what is desperate. Understand this: you never lose by choosing yourself. You only lose when you betray yourself for someone who was never worth it. The world will try to convince you that lowering your standards makes you easy to love, but the truth is the opposite. Lowering your standards makes you easy to use. Keeping your standards high makes you impossible to forget. Power will never come from bending, begging, or breaking yourself to fit someone else's vision. Power comes from standing firm in your truth, from loving yourself enough to walk away from what doesn't serve you, and from demanding through your actions, not your words, that others rise to meet your worth. The moment you stop begging and start respecting yourself, you shift from being someone's option to being their only choice. You stop chasing love, and love starts chasing you. You stop handing out discounts on your worth, and people start paying full price for your presence. That's the difference, that's the transformation, that's the power you've been searching for all along. Because in the end, begging is weakness disguised as effort, but self-respect is strength disguised as silence. And nothing in this world is louder, more attractive, or more unstoppable than a person who refuses to bow to anyone but their own standards. The right words unlock his deepest fear of losing you, and if you understand how powerful this truth is, you'll realize you never have to chase, beg, or force anyone to see your worth. Words are more than sounds. They are signals to the heart and mind. They carry weight, energy, and intention. When you choose them with strength instead of desperation, when you deliver them from a place of confidence instead of insecurity, they penetrate deeper than any action could. Men aren't moved by constant explaining or endless texting. They are moved by words that strike at their core, words that wake up that hidden fear inside them. The fear of losing the one thing they know they cannot replace. You see, every man can admire beauty, every man can be distracted by someone new, but not every man finds a woman whose words shake his soul. When you speak with self-respect and certainty, your words don't sound like pleas. They sound like ultimatums written in fire. They remind him that you are not chained to him, that your presence is a choice, not a gift he automatically deserves. That's what flips the script. That's what makes him realize that no matter how strong he thinks he is, he cannot bear the thought of life without you. The right words are not manipulative, they are clarifying. They don't come from a place of trying to trick him. They come from a place of reminding him who you are and what you stand for. Begging tells him, you can do whatever you want and I'll still be here. But the right words tell him, if you cannot rise to the level of how I deserve to be treated, I won't hesitate to leave. That single message is more powerful than 1,000 texts filled with tears and apologies. Why? Because it speaks directly to his deepest fear. The fear that you will no longer be his, that another man will experience the greatness he took for granted, that he will have to live with the regret of losing the one woman who made him feel alive. Think about how people act when they sense they are about to lose something valuable. Suddenly, their attention sharpens, their energy shifts, they wake up. A man who has grown comfortable, lazy, or careless in a relationship will keep drifting until something shakes him awake. And nothing wakes him faster than hearing words that remind him you have the power to walk away. It doesn't matter how tough or confident he seems on the outside. Every man fears losing the woman he knows is different from the rest. He may not admit it, but it lingers in his subconscious, waiting to be triggered by the right words. The reason these words work so powerfully is because they create contrast. When you say them, you show him the gap between what he's been giving you and what you're actually worth. That gap terrifies him. It forces him to confront the reality that if he doesn't step up, he will lose everything. It turns his attention from taking you for granted to fighting for you with everything he has. And the irony is, you don't even need to shout or argue to deliver them. Often, the calmest words have the loudest impact. A simple statement delivered with composure carries far more weight than hours of emotional pleading. For example, when you say something like, "I refuse to compete for your attention. I either have it fully or not at all," it lands differently than begging for his time. Those words communicate finality. They trigger that primal fear of being replaced. They make him realize that if he doesn't give you what you deserve, someone else will. And that thought burns deeper than jealousy. It awakens survival mode in his mind and heart. Suddenly, you are not the one chasing, he is. But here's the key: the words only work if you mean them. Empty threats or dramatic lines spoken out of insecurity will not trigger his fear. They'll make him roll his eyes. He has to feel the conviction behind your words. He has to believe that you are capable of walking away if necessary. That authenticity is what makes the words powerful. Without self-respect, they sound like noise. With self-respect, they sound like truth, and truth is impossible to ignore. The right words also work because they flip the dynamic of scarcity. When you chase a man, you tell him subconsciously that he is rare and you are replaceable. But when you speak with power, when your words remind him that you are the rare one, the unique one, the woman he cannot find again, suddenly he is the one feeling scarcity. He realizes your presence is not guaranteed, your love is not endless, and your patience is not infinite. That realization terrifies him more than anything else, and fear of loss is always stronger than the comfort of gain. When used with wisdom, the right words can reset the entire direction of a relationship. They shift him from complacency to action, from arrogance to appreciation, from taking you lightly to taking you seriously, and it doesn't take paragraphs of speeches. It takes clarity. The words that unlock his fear are short, sharp, and final. They don't sound like, "Please don't leave me." They sound like, "I will not stay where I'm not valued." They don't sound like, "I'll do anything to make this work." They sound like, "I will only invest in a man who invests in me." Do you see the difference? One comes from desperation, the other from dignity. Every man alive knows deep down that the woman he truly fears losing is the one who refuses to lose herself for him. And when your words align with that truth, you become unforgettable. He may forget every compliment you ever gave him, but he will never forget the moment your words shook him to the core and made him realize he was on the verge of losing everything. That memory will echo in his mind every time he's tempted to take you for granted again. This doesn't mean you weaponize words just to control him. It means you understand their power and use them as a reflection of your boundaries and standards. Words become your sword and shield. They protect you from being undervalued, and they cut through the fog of excuses and games. They leave no room for confusion, and when you master this, you'll notice a shift. You no longer need to explain yourself repeatedly, because your words have already carved the truth into his heart. The right words don't just unlock his fear of losing you, they also unlock your strength. They remind you of the power you hold, the control you have over your life, and the dignity you will never trade for cheap affection. They become a mirror, reflecting back the truth that you never had to beg in the first place. You only had to speak with courage. So remember this. Men may resist nagging, ignore pleading, and dismiss endless arguments, but they cannot ignore the quiet thunder of words spoken with conviction. They cannot escape the chill that runs through their body when they hear you say something that makes them picture their life without you. That picture alone is enough to transform how he treats you. And when you understand this truth, you'll never again waste energy chasing, because you'll know that your words, when spoken from strength, will do all the chasing for you. Chasing begins when he recognizes your unmatched value. And until that moment, everything you do will feel like a battle to prove yourself to someone who is blind to what you bring to the table. A man doesn't chase simply because you exist, and he doesn't chase just because you are beautiful. Beauty is everywhere, attention is cheap, and distractions surround him daily. What makes him chase is the realization that what he has in you cannot be duplicated, cannot be substituted, and cannot be replaced no matter where he looks. That's when the game changes. That's when he switches from being casual to being intentional, from being distant to being present, from being careless to being protective. Value is not about perfection, it's about rarity. Diamonds are valuable not because they are flawless, but because they are rare. The same applies to you. When a man senses that your energy, your mindset, your loyalty, and your presence are unlike anyone else's, he feels that primal instinct awaken inside him. He realizes that if he doesn't step up and chase you, someone else will. That fear doesn't just motivate him, it consumes him. Suddenly, keeping you becomes a mission, not an option. He begins to think differently, act differently, and prioritize differently because the idea of losing someone with your level of value is unbearable. The truth is, most women lose this chase before it even begins because they hand over their value too easily. They make themselves too available, too predictable, and too accessible. They rush to prove their worth before he's even earned the right to experience it. And when value is served without effort, it loses its impact. He sees it as ordinary, even if it isn't. But when you carry yourself with self-respect, when you move with quiet confidence, when you show him that you are a woman who knows her worth without flaunting it, that's when the chase begins. That's when he recognizes that you are not like the rest, that you don't need him to complete you, and that being with you is not a privilege handed out freely. It's something he must fight to maintain. Recognition of your value doesn't come from you constantly reminding him with words. It comes from him experiencing it through your actions and your presence. He notices it in the way you handle yourself under pressure, in the way you set boundaries without apology, in the way you don't collapse into pieces when life gets tough. He notices it when he sees other people respect you, admire you, and gravitate toward you naturally. That collective picture begins to sink into his mind. You are not just another woman. You are a woman whose value stands unmatched, and losing you would be the greatest mistake of his life. The chase begins when he realizes you are not waiting around for him to figure out your worth. You have options, you have standards, you have a life that is rich, full, and meaningful, whether he's in it or not. That independence is magnetic. It creates tension, and tension creates desire. The less desperate you are for him, the more desperate he becomes for you. Why? Because he recognizes that while many women might want his attention, few will ever command his respect the way you do. Respect and value are linked, and once he respects you at the deepest level, the chase never stops. This doesn't mean you play hard to get by pretending to be someone you're not. Pretending is cheap. True unmatched value comes from authenticity. It comes from embracing the fullness of who you are, your strength, your vulnerability, your wisdom, and your vision. It comes from living with purpose, from not lowering your standards, from not selling yourself short. That authenticity makes you irreplaceable because no one else can replicate it. When he sees that, when he feels it, his mind shifts from "she's a great woman" to "she's the woman I cannot afford to lose." That shift is what ignites the chase. Men are hunters by nature. They may act indifferent, they may hide behind games, but deep inside, every man craves the thrill of pursuit. The problem is most men stop chasing because the pursuit becomes too easy. When everything is handed to them, they stop valuing it. But when they encounter a woman whose value is undeniable, they rise to the challenge. They chase not because you make it impossible, but because you make it meaningful. They chase because they know they are not just competing against other men. They are competing against the standard you have set for yourself. And that competition pushes them to evolve. Chasing begins not when you convince him of your value, but when he convinces himself. That's why your role is not to force recognition, but to live in a way that makes it obvious. When you walk away from disrespect instead of tolerating it, you raise your value. When you prioritize your growth, your health, your purpose, and your dreams, you raise your value. When you treat yourself with the same love and loyalty you expect from him, you raise your value. Every action you take sends him a silent message. This is who I am, this is what I deserve, and I will never settle for less. Those silent messages cut deeper than any words ever could. Once he recognizes your unmatched value, everything changes. The excuses stop, the games stop, the delays stop. He starts showing up because he realizes that if he doesn't, someone else will. He starts putting in effort not out of obligation, but out of fear of losing what he knows he will never find again. He begins to chase not because you demanded it, but because you inspired it. That's the difference between begging for attention and commanding respect. But here's the most important part. The chase doesn't end when he finally wins you. For a man who truly recognizes your unmatched value, the chase becomes permanent. It becomes his daily mission to keep you, to honor you, to cherish you, and to remind you that he sees what he has. Men don't stop chasing because they lose interest. They stop chasing because they stop seeing value. If he keeps seeing your value, if he keeps recognizing that you are rare, then the chase becomes eternal. This is why you must never compromise your value for temporary validation. The moment you start lowering your standards to keep him, you stop being the woman he fears losing and start being the woman he takes for granted. The moment you stop respecting yourself to gain his respect, you lose the very power that made him chase you in the first place. Chasing begins with value, and it only continues when that value remains untouchable. So understand this. You don't need to scream for attention. You don't need to beg for effort. And you don't need to compete for his love. All you need to do is embody your unmatched value. When you do, he will chase you, not because you forced him, but because every part of his being knows he would rather run himself into the ground chasing you than live with the emptiness of losing you. That is the power of value. That is the power of being rare. And that is why chasing doesn't begin until he recognizes that you are the one thing in this world he cannot afford to let slip away. And so the truth is simple but unshakable. A man will only chase when he finally wakes up to the reality of your unmatched value. You don't have to scream for his love. You don't have to twist yourself into someone else just to keep his attention. And you don't have to live in fear that you're not enough. The moment you recognize your own worth and refuse to settle for less, the moment you walk with confidence and set boundaries that cannot be broken, he begins to see what you've known all along. You are rare, you are irreplaceable, and you are the woman he cannot afford to lose. Chasing is not about games, manipulation, or pretending. It's about standing so firmly in your authenticity that he feels the weight of it every time he looks at you. It's about being so rooted in self-respect that he understands your love is not guaranteed but earned. That fear of loss is what drives him. That recognition of value is what consumes him, and that is when the chase becomes unstoppable. Because when a man truly sees you for who you are, he doesn't just want you. He will move mountains to keep you.